Good afternoon and welcome to our Learn from the Best Masterclass on how to advocate for culturally diverse women in your workplace. My name is Div Pillay and I am the CEO of Mind Tribes and co-founder of social enterprise Culturally Diverse Woman. I am delighted to be your host for this fireside discussion today. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we are dialing in from. I am on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I would like to, on behalf of all of us, to pay our collective respects to elders past, present, and emerging. We extend this respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people with us today. We acknowledge the continuing connections to the lands, the skies, the waters, as well as the rich languages, stories, and songlines. Sovereignty was never ceded, and this was and always will be Aboriginal land. Now, today's masterclass is all about how to advocate for culturally diverse women in your workplace. And we'll explore these practically through a C-suite leader conversation alongside a culturally diverse woman leader. And this C-suite leader has consistently advocated since 2017 for this intersectional gender equality within her space. So this leader that I'm talking about is Coretta Bessie, who's the Chief Procurement Officer and Head of Commercial Services at Westpac. She's also the co-founder of Ladies in Procurement, a network, and a director at St. John Ambulance, New South Wales. And she's also joined by Zoe Cherney, a results-driven senior leader procurement professional. And Zoe was also recognized as Employee of the Year 2019, a CEO award at the Westpac Group. Now, I know both of these ladies very closely and know very acutely of how they make change in the spaces that they operate in. So I'm very delighted to have them in conversation. And we're going to tap into that lived experience through giving you clear steps on how to navigate and chart this in your workplace, because it is quite challenging to understand what does it mean to advocate for someone else. That might be you, or you might be in the audience as a culturally diverse woman thinking, how do I have this conversation? Who is that advocate in my space, and how do I engage them properly? So for today's session, we're going to open up that dialogue, and for you, the audience, will run for about 40 minutes and absolutely save that last bit of time for Q&A. We'll open up the Q&A right from the start. So you'll see that Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. So please keep those questions running. We are going to curate them and get to as many as we can, as quickly as we can. So we are engaging you, the audience. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Coretta and Zoe with me to join in this dialogue.
Thank you. Delighted to be here. Thanks, Deb.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you.
Now, this for me is a wonderful conversation to have because I've often reflected on how far both of you as leaders in your spaces have come in the short time that I've known you. And for Coretta and myself, it's been a journey since 2015, 2016. And for the audience, I actually stalked Coretta at a Women in Procurement conference and thought, what a fantastic leader she is. I must talk to her about how she kind of advocates for gender equality. And we got into a really warm conversation back then. And it's been a continuing dialogue that I've much enjoyed over the years. And Zoe and I crossed paths because Coretta actually nominated Zoe for one of our masterclass programs. And I'm very grateful for you, Coretta, bringing Zoe into my world. And it's been a really rich dialogue as well. So to kick us off, I'd like to know from each of you, how have you really navigated your career trajectories? And Coretta, to you as a C-suite leader, how have you done that, navigating your own gender inclusion all the way through? Procurement is a space which has traditionally not been really heavily female dominated, especially at an exec level. And Zoe, for you, the same question, but with a little bit of a difference. As being a culturally diverse woman, how have you navigated that gender intersectionality in your space? So I'll start with you, Coretta.
Yeah, certainly. So I've worked across mining, heavy manufacturing, telecommunications, government infrastructure, and energy utilities. And they're all pretty blokey industries, right? So all of them have workforces that are exceptionally culturally diverse, especially in the operations and trades. However, when you're looking at a lot more of the offices, it's still very, very much male dominated in terms of all of those functions and professions. Even for the ones that you'd assume, traditionally would be more female oriented. So there was an extreme lack of gender diversity in leadership as a result of that. And it just basically meant that you didn't have any role models that you could aspire to be. Then I was really blessed in my 20s to have a male leader and a sponsor who really took a chance on me to promote me into leadership as a very young female in a very blokey environment. And I made my way through a couple of different levels. I was quite ambitious. I really wanted to do a good job. I really wanted to learn more and more about things. And I had a really innate desire to lead, because it wasn't about managing. I don't want to manage people, but being able to lead and take accountability for the development and the growth of other people to, areas that they didn't think that they could do and be successful in, was something that really motivated me. So it wasn't though until other females started to reach out to me and ask me for my advice on something they were dealing with, or to ask me about my career and how I'd navigated some of that I really realized that I actually needed to be not just a good leader for my own team, but I needed to be a real advocate and an ally for other people, and especially where they were giving me views as to things that were going on that they couldn't solve. I actually needed to be a real megaphone for those individuals that didn't have a voice to be able to raise those. So I've been exceptionally passionate about diversity and inclusion ever since, and I'm now really grateful that I am the Chief Procurement Officer at Westpac, which as an organisation, this is one of their strongest values, and that's where Zoe and I ran into each other on a stronger basis. Zoe.
Yeah, sure. So I started my procurement career as a graduate at Insurance Australia Group, and then it is an NRMA. So then that industry itself is also very male dominated. I was working in a team of 60 people, and there was only 5 women. And then I was the only Asian female. But I didn't really feel I was treated differently. I felt like the team was really inclusive until one day my boss, who's a white male, and he pulled me aside, with all the good intentions. He said to me that because you're Asian, you look a lot younger than your age. And he said it as a compliment as well. And then he said, and then because of that, if you want to be taken seriously, there's a couple of things that you can do. You can change the way you dress, you can wear darker colors, lower your voice, because I have a high-pitched voice, and also speak slowly with more authority. And then at the beginning of my career, I took that advice to the letter. And I have always been working for a male CPO until Coretta. So I worked at New South Wales Treasury. I worked at Westpac, and before Coretta, we also had a male CPO. They are all, good leaders, but I kind of felt like I couldn't bring my authentic self to work. I forced myself to watch cricket that I really, really don't like. So that I think today I felt like, even if you work in an inclusive team, is the unconscious bias is still there. I felt like I'm more encouraged or self-assured to bring my authentic self to work. And I just felt like, I think the bias is there, but I'm more equipped to know how to build my personal brand and to navigate through those challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. So Zoe, can I ask very pointedly, did you take that advice on by that male leader, and did you start to implement it? It sounded like you said you did. You took that advice
I did. Yeah, I honestly, in fact, I really appreciate that he, gave me those advices, really candid. And that did help me at the beginning of my career. I think it's a phase that, I learned how to control how I behave. But I think that's only step one. And then, we kind of need to move into the future, is that how do we encourage other culturally diverse women to just be yourself and still have that respect you deserve?
Yeah, such a good point. You remind me of so many of the culturally diverse women that I've engaged with. Who I presented a chief executive women a roundtable of 40 senior executive women, and there was one Asian female in the group. And after she heard me speak, she said, "You know what, Div? I feel like I've got this far in my career as a senior board ASX board chair or leader because I've actually traded off a lot of who I am as an Asian woman to be where I am." And so she's in her 60s. She's spent 40 years changing and trying to fit in. And she said, "It's the first time I've recognized now in my 60s that I've probably given up a lot of who I really, really am to try and fit in." And she did all the things, the footy and the engaging at pubs and things like that, things that went counterintuitive to her natural comfort level. So I hear you, and I hear many other women walk this tightrope of how much do I give up of myself to fit in enough to gain my next career move. And you wonder whether that needs to really realistically be a trade-off or not. So I'm going to turn to Coretta and ask, when you're managing someone who comes from a different cultural heritage and who's sitting in this funny place of identity and worried about how much do I give up or keep. What would you say you have said to women before? Because I know you're a big advocate of just being who you authentically are as well.
Yeah, so I'm really strong on you need to be yourself. You can look at other people, you can role model yourself on other people, you can emulate other people, but you can't be other people. So at the end of the day, you've got to find who you're really comfortable with, and you've got to bring your cultural background and your life experience with you, because that's what actually makes you you. And I still remember meeting with you, Div, and we had a great chat. It was a very, very warm chat. And I still remember saying to you about being a female in a male-dominated environment is tough. And you said, yeah, but being a culturally diverse female in a white male-dominated environment is not like twice as tough. It's like exponentially tougher. And I still remember your statement to me was, you shouldn't be focusing on diversity. Diversity is already all around us. You don't need to create diversity. All these diversity and inclusion programs, you don't need to create the diversity. What you need to do is you need to be really inclusive of that diversity. And it was something that really, really resonated with me at the time. And I am an inherently curious individual. So when someone makes me think about something different, then I try and go and learn as much as I can about it. And I've learned that and being a leader and being in an organization that I can have influence with other leaders, even to be inclusive, sometimes you need to actually give permission to specific individuals to be themselves. You need to actually encourage them to be themselves. You need to encourage them to share about their upbringing and to invite them to speak up and give their views in a safe environment. And even more importantly, what I've found is you need, when they do speak up, and they do give their views and their different views to everyone else around the table, you need to really loudly respect and thank them for those different views, because that's how people and teams learn that, that is about being inclusive. So I am really passionate about respecting that everyone is unique, our different perspectives and views, and the inclusion of all of those contribution, all of that makes us all very, very much richer. So I do actively look for situations where someone may not be understood, and I try desperately to try and share, it may be because of these reasons, so how do we go about making sure that we all can hear them and can understand them? So that to me is that inclusiveness, and hence why Zoe and I kind of clicked so quickly. So she gave me some very strong feedback right from the start in terms of where we were at with the team, and I heard her and I listened, and it was always a very open relationship.
Oh, I love that. I love your focus on inclusion, because that's where the work and the effort needs to be made. And that, I feel, to the audience, it is actually a conscious decisioning. You have to choose to be inclusive every single time, because you might have an unconscious or conscious bias that kind of makes you stop and think, "Oh, what Zoe's saying is a pretty risky thing to say. It's a bit disruptive and it's a bit new, but that kind of quick assessment needs to be quietened to actually create space, which is what Coretta's talking about. Create space for that difference to continue to have a positive benefit and an impact. And I just want to clear up for the audience. I'm going to just clear up the definition of ally and advocate. They're two words that kind of get pushed around a lot. And so who Coretta is by virtue of her seniority is an advocate. An advocate is someone quite senior in positional power to actually break down and reduce barriers. So Coretta can have a voice that actually makes significant impact and change. So she could question, for example, why so many culturally diverse females are clustering around the graduate level, and there's a disproportionate level at the graduate level, but not enough progressing towards the middle or senior parts of the organization. So her voice has positional power. So that is very important to know about advocacy, right? An ally is someone who's sitting in a meeting environment, who's watching maybe Zoe being talked over or pushed aside. And this is someone who may not have the seniority of Coretta, but actually can create the space for this difference to be included by putting a stop on people walking over Zoe in that conversation, going, hang on a minute, we didn't kind of fully engage with Zoe. Zoe, do you want to say, elaborate on what you're saying? So that's a good allyship, and allyship can be very active and in the moment. They may not break down systemic barriers, but it can be done very quickly. So Coretta can be both an ally and an advocate at the same time. So everyone has a place in this space of inclusion, and everyone can make a difference is what I want the audience to know. So Coretta, I'll just ask you to think about when you've been a great ally and advocate and give us some examples. But Zoe, you give us on the receiving end, what did that feel like when you had good advocacy and good allyship across your career?
I think it has to your point, Dave, that have a leader who backs you up, and just know that, have a senior leader at that level that believes in you, has a huge impact. I think it gives me courage to take on, more challenges that, I wouldn't normally take on. Like, I wouldn't think that maybe I can do that. I think for me personally, that I felt like, again, because I've never actually worked for a female, a senior leader before, that having Coretta as a role model, and just that her existence itself is inspiring to me, because, there is a senior leader there. She's liked and she's respected. It's not impossible to have both. And, she didn't have to give up a family to have a successful career. She did have both. It's just a possibility of, that's possible. And then I just remember that Coretta, one of our one-on-ones, that she told me that, I see a lot of myself in you. I almost, I got so emotional, because that's the ultimate advocacy. And I think it's a moment that made me feel like, and realize for the first time in my career, that, one day maybe I can be a CPO myself. Is actually a possibility for someone like me. And one day, maybe I can be that inspiration to someone else. I can actually really make a positive impact on others. I think that's what that impact is like, you do have the ability to influence other people. And then on the challenge, I've recently applied for the executive MBA program at University of New South Wales. And then, I also recently left Coretta's team. I was trying something different. And then I thought, okay, she advocated for me when I was in her team, but I'm no longer in her team. She has a team of 100 people. She's a CPO at Westpac. Can I actually get her to write me a recommendation? And it took me 3 months to gather my courage to ask her. And then she responded in 24 hours. And then I'm like, oh my God, I missed a term. I could have asked, 3 months ago. I could have started that already. And I think I still need that courage to be able to ask someone for the advocacy, for her time. And I think that just the impact doesn't stop when I, stop working in her team. That influence, I think I carry that confidence you know, in my next job in the future as well.
I like what you said, Zoe, about sharing the courage to ask. I think generally I see a very, this is a very gendered view that women more broadly, stereotypically, feel like it's not their place to actually ask someone senior for time, for support. They often think this is something too much to ask, and they might play a very lonely game and think there's no support around them. But the asking is such a deliberate move, a strategic one, and something that we kind of surround ourselves with fear, and we need to debunk the fear of the fact that it is really possible. And what's the worst that you can happen? Someone can say, no, not now. I often say, then when and who, like, who can help me now? So so talk to me about that, Coretta.
Yeah, when you talk about fear, it's interesting because fearing and anxiety is exactly the same emotions that someone has when you actually break it down, because we put words around our emotions and how we're feeling, right? And people fear something, or they're anxious about something, and that emotion that they're trying to capture and describe is exactly the same description that they talk about when they're excited. So that butterflies in your stomach, the whole, your heart kind of, thinking a little bit faster, etc. What happens is, if you can just re-describe that feeling or that emotion and put it in such a really positive light, like excited, like instead of saying I'm fearful to be able to go to someone and ask them if they have time for me, or I'm fearful to be able to ask them whether I could actually take on this extra opportunity, actually turn it around and say, I'm excited about going and asking if they've got this opportunity and if they would support me in this, or, if they would spend time with me. I think as women generally, and definitely in terms of different cultural backgrounds, we overestimate the impact of someone rejecting us. Like, what's the worst case if they say no? And we completely underestimate the impact of the opportunity they could provide. So if we can just recreate that description of what we're feeling as being excited about something and looking at the positive, it's really, really powerful just to switch that in your brain.
I love that. And it's taking me back, and it's giving me a deja vu moment of watching you on stage in that Women in Procurement conference. And I thought, that's it. I'm going to wait in queue to talk to you as a speaker. And I thought, you know what? Either way, you're going to give me something great. You're going to give me something that will open up my lens on what's happening with women in procurement in this space. And I remember wanting to ask you about culturally diverse women in this space. And it was great because you actually were pretty honest to say, you know what? I haven't really thought about it that acutely, but now that you're turning my lens to it. So actually, I gave you something inadvertently, and you gave me something, that I didn't expect. So I think I wasn't going into it to get something specific out of you. I was more interested and curious. And I think if you're right about, if we turn that fear, because absolutely my heart was pumping as the queue got shorter to go to see you, and I was like, oh God, what am I going to ask Coretta? And then as soon as I got closer to you, I was like, no, I'm just going to have a conversation with you and open it up a little bit. And I think I had built it up in my mind as the queue got shorter and shorter that this is going to be such a big conversation, and actually it was just such a warm one. We surprise ourselves by leaning into that human touch and connection. So I want to let the audience know that to be an advocate or an ally doesn't need to be this massive kind of learning curve. It's actually just a gesture of kindness, of generosity, of openness, of connection two-way, because you've got to discover as an ally, can I stop and think, what does Zoe need from me, and can I actually assist? And if I can't, then what can I give Zoe in the meantime or in the short term? So it's not such a massive conversation on both ends. It's actually just a human to human connection. So Zoe, can you tell me about what would you say to culturally diverse women who are going, I don't even know who my advocate and ally is. How do I go about choosing somebody? Do I need somebody? And what would you say? What would your advice be in retrospect? Because this has worked for you, but what would you say to women in the audience?
I think for culturally diverse women, I mean, before I joined that masterclass program with you, Dave, that I always had a question to myself is that why do I need it? You know, I spent years trying to fit in. Why now that do I want to highlight it? I'm a culturally diverse woman. I think I realized that just through the master classes and through networking with other people that have the same challenges is that the challenge is not how we behave. We know how to behave. I'm not shy. I'm quite confident. I'm outspoken. I'm almost never quiet in any meetings. So it's not about learning how to behave. I think our reality is the challenge is that how people perceive our behaviors. You know, people might be expecting us to be agreeable and modest. And then ironically, to progress your career, you need to ask for stretch assignment. You need to ask things from your boss, your leaders, and you need to take credit for your own work. And all of those things are not what people expected from us. So if you actually say, I disagree, you might throw people off guard. And, how do you then navigate that challenge? I think that's the thing that we can learn from these master classes is really not about you need to be confident. It's not that simple. So then to find your advocate is, a real example that if my behavior was interpreted in a different way, then you have someone like Coretta to say, actually, that's actually not her intention. That's not true. So I think that's the value of having an advocate. And, if for anyone out there who's unsure that who can be your advocate, you don't have to have one, you can ask multiple people. If you have the courage to ask, I mean, I found, in the past 10 years, even the male leaders, they are really willing to help you, but, they don't really relate to what we're experiencing, but they are generally trying to help you. So give them a chance, ask them.
Good advice. And I love the multiple kind of advocates and allies. And I'll ask you, Coretta, and this is a little experience from Andrew Cresp, who's the ex-CIO of NAB. And when he came to our session as an ally and advocate, he said, you know what? I didn't even realize that I was an ally and advocate to most people. I just accepted all the coffee meetings that everyone, because I'm really keen on a conversation. And he said, admittedly, now that I think about it in hindsight, maybe there was a question in there and I didn't kind of lean in. And it was funny because a lot of the women that were there from NAB said, oh my gosh, we've been the people inviting Andrew for coffee. And they realized on their end that they didn't have a specific ask. So here's this nice, inclusive senior leader, really generous with his time, didn't know he was an advocate and ally, and actually he didn't know what the ask was. So he said he changed his frame to say, what do you need from me? Be clear. And I think that's something that women stereotypically struggle with, about specifically asking for the what, being clear about the ask, especially with culturally diverse women as well. They're jumping a hierarchy that might be pretty uncomfortable if they come from, legacies of careers, 5-10 years working in Southeast Asian countries, for example. It is really not a done thing to actually go to a CPO and say, Coretta, I need some of your time and here's specifically what I need. It seems almost counterintuitive to how we behave. So Coretta, have you had those conversations where people have either made you feel like you're not sure what the ask is, or you have to lean in and clarify that?
Yes, definitely. And it's interesting. One of the things that Zoe just said in terms of you need to have multiple, I'm a really big fan of when I talk to mentees, etc. I talk about building a board. So if you're the CEO of your own career, just like a CEO of a business, has a board of directors that they actually, refer to and take advice and guidance from. You need like a CEO. You need a board of your own career. So if you think about that, you need mentors, you need advocates, you need allies, you need sponsors, you need coaches, you need probity advisors, someone who will keep you to account. That's my husband usually. But you need a whole range of people that you rely on. You're not in this alone. No one's in this alone, right? And it's amazing because as soon as people reach out to me and say, hey, I saw this on LinkedIn, or I was in this conference that you were speaking at, can I have a coffee with you? I can tell you, I've never said no for a coffee. I'm actually a really cheap, kind of consultant, because you can grab half an hour of my time for $4. And
Slash wine.
Yeah, or wine, yeah. But it is, I have never turned down a coffee. It might be late or it might be early or anything like that, but just to be able to spend some time with someone and understand what they're doing and what they want from me and what I can share with them, I'm honoured when someone asks me that. And so I do have lots and lots of one-on-one sessions every week for different people, different backgrounds and everything. And I always ask, I love that you were just talking about that from the gentleman, but I always ask at the end of the discussion that we've got, no matter what we've discussed and where it's gone to, is what can I do for you at the moment? Like, is there anything I can do? Is there anyone I can connect you with? Is there anything that I can support you with? Because I do find that people need permission to be able to ask sometimes. So even though they might have come with that ask in mind, and even though the conversation might have been kind of okay, just still that whole step about putting it out there, giving people permission to be able to ask is like, it's freeing for some people. They go, actually, there is something. And it's amazing how often that happens. So yeah, I'd really encourage anyone who's going to, that's for anyone, whether that's new generations of individuals coming through that are unsure about themselves, or new people coming into an organization that, that's a very different culture from what they might have gotten from. So I think connection is what makes us human. So don't ever hesitate to reach out for a coffee. That's for sure.
Ooh, I know there's like 64 people who might say yes to that invitation on this call. I might just, in the last question for both of you is just taking this up to a macro level of change. What we're seeing is that gender equality in Australia really hasn't made change for all women from different backgrounds. So the push at the top for that 50-50 balance on boards and executive teams has really, just by pure numbers and stacks of numbers, looking at this quantitative statistics, it shows that there are similar types of women from similar socioeconomic and cultural backgrounds, and more generally there have been Anglo and European women who have taken those seats, right? So what we're advocating for is that gender equality is for everyone. It's for all women from all different backgrounds. And there's the case for change is that there's 51% women in Australia, 30+% of them are overseas born, and 3.2% are Indigenous women. So we're asking, where's the missing 32 point something women in our landscape of leadership? And we're just not seeing it coming through. And the reason why I'm a big advocate for this allyship and advocacy toolkit is because it makes change faster than seeing a whole behemoth of an organization move and recognize and put structures in place to really accelerate the movement of culturally diverse women who typically in the private and public sector sit in the middle of leadership, mid to senior. We're just not seeing them get up into executive leadership as fast. So that's my big fat hairy problem to solve. And what I'm doing is I'm really gathering the right people to make change with me, and Coretta and Zoe have been two of those, leaders really actively making change. So my question to both of you is, how easy or difficult is this to sponsor a woman, Coretta, who might never see themselves in the talent pipeline, and Zoe, how easy is it for you to share with like-minded, culturally diverse women that they should back themselves and really change the course of their career trajectory? So I'll turn to each of you for a comment or two, and then we'll lead into questions.
I'll start, and I'll give you my perspective from me as an individual who didn't have belief in herself in one sense, and how I've kind of switched that around, because I have told this story a number of times before. But I remember it was just before I became an executive. I was still a very senior manager, and I was called up by the Chief Human Resources Officer, and she told me, Coretta, we've got this Chief Executive Women's Program that we sponsor. We have two attendees that we're able to nominate for that, and we'd like to nominate you as one of those attendees. And this is a great program. It's huge. It's a great investment. And I remember distinctly saying to her, look, Barbara, I'm really, really flattered. I'm really honoured, but there is so many other wonderful women out there that are a lot more experienced and a lot more potential than I do. I think you've got the wrong person. And seriously, she yelled at me through the phone. She yelled at me and she said, Coretta, if I believe that you can do it, then you need to believe that you can do it. And I tell you, the amount of times that I've gone to individual, particularly women, definitely culturally diverse women, and said, there's this opportunity over here, and I think that you would be great at it. You should throw your name in the ring. And they go, oh, I don't think I could. I tell you what, if I think you can do it, you have to believe that you can do it, right? If someone else really, you know, is telling you that you should be thinking about something, think about it seriously. Don't be doubting yourself. That's one thing that many people do. So, you know, take that leap.
And you know what, Coretta, I love that you have consistently, since the time that I've met you, really be laser focused on selecting culturally diverse women to accelerate and advance them. And it takes a senior leader like you to really put that focus and attention on and spotlight those women, because without your spotlight they actually can sometimes feel pretty invisible, because the formal structures in an organization don't see them yet on the talent pipeline. So what you're actually doing is you're spotting talent way before anyone else spots them, which is actually a proactive step to make, and it needs that advocacy and allyship. Otherwise it really doesn't organically happen, and this is why we have that big macro problem, is that these women are traditionally not seen, for whatever reason, unconscious or conscious bias, as potential to be backed, and a lot of women are pigeonholed in those roles. And our data shows that many migrant women are underemployed, so they actually have skill sets far beyond the role, but they actually are underemployed in those roles, and then you get judged and perceived on the role that you're actually performing. And no one sees the extra effort that you can put in. So I love what you're doing, is you're breaking a system and causing movement when it would pretty much be glacially slow. So I don't want to underestimate the power of your impact. You're doing heaps, and the fact that you've done it since 2016, since the time I've met you all the way through now, you're making an absolute impactful change that I just want to applaud and amplify. You do a fantastic job. So Zoe, what about you? When you think, you hear women, you hear a lot of women, I know you talk to a lot of culturally diverse women who say the same thing that Coretta was saying, me, like, really, do I need to back myself? Why? I'm not ready yet. You've heard those things. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I catch up with, you know, the other culturally diverse women in our team, and there are quite a lot of them, and then they kind of they're still in a more junior role in the team, but I think I'm hoping I can use my own experience to encourage them to, you know, don't be afraid to change job. You know, you need that broader experience, and then for us to be able to progress to the next level, that you need to invest in yourself. You need to make sure that you know, you don't just need to advocate, you still need to have control and then invest in yourself, so that you have the qualification, you have the experience to be able to progress there. You still have to do the hard work. So it's about that plus the opportunity that your advocate create for you. Then, you know, that's how you can progress your career, have more influence. But I do believe that people at any level have that ability to influence, you know, other people, culturally diverse women, in a positive way. Sometimes you just need to be a cheerleader, you need to be a therapist, you need to encourage each other to say, go for it, right? Like, what do you have to lose? You apply for the job, and you apply for 3 jobs, you didn't get any, but you get feedback, you get things that you can work on. So I think it's about that. And maybe it's about, you know, being part of a tribe, being part of that supporting group, so that you can share experiences and just encourage each other.
I love it. I love the cheerleader. I'm taking that away with me. I think we all have to be cheerleaders for each other, and that sort of dovetails really nicely on a previous comment from Coretta about finding that tribe. So I love that. There's many people. We just have to really be deliberate about finding them and keeping them close and helping us keep clear about our path forward. So I'm going to turn our attention to Q&As. There's some really good Q&A coming through. The first one I think is really interesting take on it, and I'd love to hear your views, it's about whether, when we encourage people to be their authentic selves and bring their whole selves to work, what are the structures that ensure that safety? I think the question is about safety, because it's about not disadvantaging someone taking that advice to heart and actually doing it. Because, and this talks to your propositioning, Coretta, of whether it's an inclusive environment or not. So we say this bring your whole self to work, I've heard in the D&I space for so long now. And I always wonder, like the question asker, is the environment ready for everyone to bring their whole selves to work? Is it safe? And will it actually disadvantage someone? I'm not sure. Either of you make a comment or two about that.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand the environment that you're working in and the organization and then the team, because every single team has its own little subculture, right? And you may find that there's an exceptionally inclusive team that's in a culture that may not necessarily be so forgiving as a an open and inclusive culture. So I do think that you need to read that, and you need to read that right, and you need to understand the allies and the advocates that you have around you, and make sure that you do engage those and have those individuals around you as you do show your authentic and genuine self. I think in an organisation, if you are an ally or you're an advocate, one of the things that you can certainly do is simply by getting people really curious and doing things like, all the various different cultural days that we have through the year, the different celebrations. I mean, my team share the celebrations as an example of Ramadan, and we have a number of individuals who share what that means in terms of their family, and the same with Chinese New Year. Like we actually celebrate those, and we encourage people to be really curious. I mean, there was very limited individuals a few years ago that were comfortable enough to be able to do an acknowledgement of country like you did at the beginning, Div. And people just need to be more curious and ask questions, and there's no dumb questions. It's if someone's curious about something, I'm fascinated by their curiousness, and I want to share with them things that happen. So that happens with every kind of different background and different culture and different upbringing. So I think it's more around creating those environments that people are curious, and you actually share a lot of different aspects of where we all come from, that people can then acknowledge and see around that, yes, everybody's actually really interested in this, and I can be my true self, and I can bring things to work, and I can dress the way that I want to dress, and I can take those celebrations and things like that, and people understand and acknowledge that that's okay. So I think COVID is actually bringing us a whole lot more authentic and genuine. I mean, I can tell you, most people sitting around in their tracksuit pants with a business shirt on, it's and having kids and pets and all of those kind of things around. I think it is bringing out a little bit more of the surrounds and that. And I would really encourage people, don't turn on your fuzzy screens on Zoom and your backgrounds and virtual and things like that in terms of your home life. Like, have that loud and proud in terms of the things that you surround yourself with, the things that signify who you are. So share that with people.
I think it's I always call it the normalizing of difference. If we just normalize different, everyone is different actually. So if we just normalize that and share that openly, it actually, what's called, academically, it's called a disclosing environment. People feel safe enough to disclose. But I like your point, Coretta, and this can kind of give some advice to the question asker, is about your allies and advocates will give you a read on how to bring that out safely and when to bring it out safely. I think if you trust in that advisory and steering from those people, because sometimes, let's be honest, those environments are just not safe to do so, and it actually might hamper your career anyway. So I'm dealing with an exec who says, we say innovation and difference, but as soon as someone brings a challenging idea, we go, oh gosh, too risky, let's just calm down. So it's those sorts of things, and an ally and advocate will steer you. I might ask, I'll jump to the next question and jump back to the one that's very specific on Westpac for you, Coretta. But Zoe, this is one, I'm not sure whether you can answer or not, but this is advice for a new person in a construction industry, so who has no advocates or allies in the workplace. You can answer this question about someone who doesn't have advocates and allies yet. what would your advice be to a culturally diverse person to kind of go and get those? Share with us.
I think it's about, you know, building a relationship with someone, you know, who don't have a lot of similarity to you. And then when I first started out, you know, I was working in this team that has 55 male. And then, you know, the approach I took was, okay, you like to talk about sports, we can do that. But then at the end of the day, we're all human beings. So I actually took a different approach now. I take a different approach. You know, I don't like to talk about sports, but I know you have kids, let's talk about that, right? I think that we're all human beings. It's not that hard to find similarities. You can talk about yourself. It's about building that authentic relationship. You know, I don't know Coretta about 2 years ago. I get to know her, you know, you get to have an open conversation, and back to the point that be clear about what you need from them. And then I think those are the things that are important for the ally and the advocate to know that what you need from them, how they can help you. And then I genuinely believe that, you know, a good leader will genuinely try to help you. Just give them away, let them know what you need.
Yeah, good answer. And I think I'll just add to that by saying I remember at different points being a new migrant woman and not having any networks, contacts. So coming from South Africa and coming into Australia and charting this rebuilding of a career, had no one. And then another juncture when I left Optus to start to be, you know, to chart my course as an entrepreneur, no networks. I was a really good employee at Optus, and then I went, I need to be on my own. How do I build this up? And at those two junctures, what I did was I was very deliberate around continuously having conversations with very different people to open up my lens. And from there, I was very selective as to, okay, who can actually advocate and amplify my message? How can I get them to say yes? Because this is an exercise in influence. It's about how do I influence someone to say, yes, I can support you. And wherever I could get those trickle bits of support, I kind of gravitated to that kind of energy and went, all right, I can do this. It gave me confidence. It debunked that fear. It gave me energy. I was like, okay, this is possible, right? Coretta was one of those early voices for me where I thought, oh, I don't know, I'm not sure. And she's like, yeah, no, go for it, try it. And so those are the things I would say to people, that you've got to start having those conversations and then be really selective, almost in recruitment mode of saying, well, who are the right people to be my advocates and allies, and how can I keep them engaged along the way on my journey? And it's your job to chart that course, not these allies and advocates to kind of make a course for you. So I'd say that in agency is important. Let's go to another one, and there's such interesting ones. Look, I've got to answer this one by Coretta. I'll get Coretta to do this one about Westpac. So this is a very targeted question. Does Westpac have a culturally diverse index to track and measure and take accountability for career mobility and career trajectory for culturally diverse women? Very loaded question.
And
it's
a very loaded question. In fact, only just in the last 6 months have we asked people to start self-identifying, and so, as you would know, gender tends to be really easy to track because people have, you know, a whole heap of forms they need to fill out as they come in, and how they identify as well now is coming more into play. But in terms of cultural backgrounds, we have a very low number of people who have chosen to self-identify, and so we're about to ramp up an activity around explaining to people why we're asking them why we want them to self-identify, because we want to celebrate the differences and we want to understand the backgrounds, and it may have been where they're born, it's maybe what they see as their cultural heritage, you know, that's all different aspects of us as a diverse organisation. But Nerida, I have actually taken your name down because I will connect you with a fabulous person called Sapphire Lobler, who will be very passionate about talking to you about the intersectionality of gender and culture, because she's exceptionally passionate about that, as well as a number of other diversity measures that she's leading at the moment for Westpac. So she'll be a great contact for you.
Very nice. And I'll disclose on behalf of Narita. Narita is actually one of my client sponsors. She's the chair of the CALD network at AGL.
Right.
Some 400 plus, people who identify as culturally linguistically diverse that Narita has really spearheaded and chartered as a chair. So she'll be very curious about that conversation for sure.
Fantastic. One of the things that I'd love to be able to talk to you about then, Narita, is we have a culturally diverse women shadowing program, which is fascinating. And so anyone can nominate. You can also nominate others. And I've done this a number of times where someone will, from a very different culturally diverse background, will come and meet with me, share with me what their objectives are and what they want to learn and what their development opportunities are, and then basically shadow me in a number of different meetings and forums that I might be holding and things like that. And then we kind of catch up afterwards. And that's we have guys as well as girls doing that program. It depends on which parts of the bank that we do that. But that is a fabulous program that I think has a lot of traction. It's not a mentoring program. It's actually really getting in there and seeing it. And now with things like COVID where everyone's remote, it's actually even easier to be able to do that, because if you just have one extra person on a video con, no one pays too much attention to that, so you can really understand the conversations. And I think those really help, particularly if you come from a different background. Those conversations that are held at very, very senior levels that normally you wouldn't be exposed to until you get there. So that's a good program.
It's a good kind of amplification of accessibility, like who gets access to what conversations. You learn and grow very quickly, very similar to the 30% project where they have board observances. So any culturally diverse women looking for board roles absolutely ask for a board observance. You absolutely can do that, because you get privy to conversations that you normally wouldn't, and you learn and grow from that. So last question, and this one I'm going to pose probably to Zoe, and I might add to that as well. So this is about, a lot of culturally diverse women are culturally conditioned not to speak up for themselves and sacrifice their dreams and ambitions for the greater group, be it family or community. This person's asking, how can you draw this out from this person's mindset? So if you're conditioned to say you don't speak up for yourself culturally, I don't know, Zoe, you have self-confessed loudspeaker everywhere. So I don't know whether you identify with this, but you probably have an insight or a comment about it.
Yeah, I actually I know quite a few of culturally diverse women who are like that, at the meetings, and they would think, do I need to say that? Can I say it? And then by the time they decided they want to make a point, the meeting is over, or the topic's passed. So I think there's a single step that you can do. It's like, I think it's like, changing a bad habit, right? You want to change. I think for anyone who raised that, the first step is that that's holding you back, so you need to change. That's great. Then the next step is just try it at a meeting. You have an idea, just say it, see what happens. That's what I did. So when I started working in corporate, I'm like, I feel like I don't understand that. Do I ask? Then I asked, and turns out no one else in that room actually understands what that acronym means anyway. And that's encouraging. So I feel like if you do that a few times, you will have more confidence in your own opinion. What do you have to say? And then you will also conquer that fear, is that no one actually judge you. People listen to what you say. And I think there's a reason you're in that meeting. There's a reason you're in that forum, because, you have expertise and knowledge to share. So take that little steps, and then encourage each other. If you see someone else, I think that's another thing that Coretta does really well, is that in the meeting, if she noticed someone, is a bit quiet, she will actually ask you.
Yeah,
So
that's good allyship.
We can do.
Yeah, that's good allyship. I think, I've often said to women, if you know that that's what's happening to you, that you generally you miss that opportunity to speak up, actually word someone up before the meeting to say, you know what, if I am quiet and it's 15 minutes into it and I haven't said anything, can you please make space for me? And I've done that myself as well, and it's worked really well, because then you're really forced to have a little bit of a voice. And you know what? Sometimes it doesn't come off that well the first go, and then you go, "Just, can you do that again next week at the same meeting? Do it again and again." And then you get that practice. But it's called nudge theory. You have to nudge yourself into it, otherwise it probably likely will never happen. And then it's just a habit of yours to kind of keep silent. So with that, we're gonna kind of close this session. There's some excellent comments and questions coming, flooding through, but we can't get to them all. What I might do is I'll ask Georgia to bank them, and if I can answer them, I will, and share it maybe on an email or another board or something like that. But I want to thank you, Coretta and Zoe, for being authentic and generous to the audience in a conversation that doesn't really get amplified. Like, we don't really get under the hood of really what does it mean to be an advocate and an ally? How is it received? How do you ask for it? These are the game-changing conversations that absolutely change people's career trajectories for the better. And it's the stuff that we seldom kind of amplify. So thank you for doing that with me this afternoon. And like what you heard today, and you're really thinking, gosh, I've got a culturally diverse woman who I'd love to nominate into a masterclass. Zoe is a fantastic alumni of our CDW masterclass. Or if you're a leader who thinks, I'm going to have this conversation with a culturally diverse woman, or you're a culturally diverse woman yourself and think, I need to just put myself through the paces of conversations like these and really discover my identity a little bit more acutely, and understand what are those barriers in front of me and how to really talk to an ally or choose them correctly. This is a masterclass that's very practical and agile, and I'd love you to join us. Here's the details on there, and a QR code as well to get more information. But with that, final thank you to Coretta and Zoe. Are there any final kind of comments that you'd like to make to close us out?
I just think that we've got a long way to go, but I think having the conversation and having everyone as an ally and an advocate is really going to get us there. So I'm up for the conversation. Happy to connect with anybody if you're keen to understand more, and happy to answer some of the questions as well as Div as they've come through. So
beautiful.
Yes, Zoe. Thank you for the opportunity. I think just as an alumni of the masterclasses, I felt like just the networking, put yourself out there, meet other people, hear about their stories, really help give you the courage as well. So I would encourage everyone to participate. And likewise, if anyone have any questions or want to know more about my experience, please connect with me on LinkedIn.
Beautiful. Thank you for joining us, everyone, the audience, Coretta, Zoe, the fantastic Monash team led by Georgia, who put it all together beautifully. Go well, stay safe wherever you are, and keep connected.